Follow the Path. The Bears Grove is adult-level discussion of role-playing as a storytelling art at samchuppmedia.com. Hello, and welcome to another Bears Grove podcast. My name is Sam Chupp, and today on the program we're going to talk about romantic fantasy at the table. And a lot of you will probably already be rolling your eyes and moving forward to the next podcast, and that's okay. I don't mind that. I'm all about consent, okay? And that is the central core of what I'm talking about today, in the sense that in order to do romantic fantasy at the table, you're going to need to have consent with your players. The players are going to need to be okay with the themes and the topics, and are going to have to be okay with the things that might or might not take place in the concept of the story. And you're going to have a conversation about that, either in your session 0 or in your ongoing adoption of this as part of your game. So a lot of people ask me, why should I put romantic fantasy in my game? And the answer really is you don't have to. And in fact, you should not if your group isn't into it. If your group is not interested in exploring those mature themes, it's totally okay. However, the benefits of having it in there is that it feels more multidimensional as a story. Think about some of the stories that you've read in fantasy literature, and you'll automatically go to some of the greatest romance stories that are just beyond the text of the fantasy stories. Furthermore, it makes your characters feel more well-rounded. I once played an entire Dungeons and Dragons campaign for 3 years, and at the end of the game, when we were doing our final catch-up and sort of contextualizing the whole thing, we kind of said, hey, to the Ranger, hey, Ranger, what's your character's gender preference? We didn't really ever find that out in the campaign. And he's like, I have no idea, because I never thought about that. Well, that struck me as odd. And ultimately, like I said, you don't have to go there. But if you want to, if you have an interest as a group to going there, there's a couple of different ways you can go. And in my book, The Book of the Kiss, I talk about different levels of romantic fantasy, okay? And those levels are designed to kind of ease you into it. Level 1 is kind of little to no romantic fantasy, and that's where most games start. Level 2 is going to be a situation where you have romance as a background element. For example, the queen has taken a secret lover who has gone missing. The local wizard has summoned a djinn and has been seen taking him out on the town in romantic escapades. The High Priestess of Lightning and the Grand Duke of Thunder have agreed to do a joint ceremonies during the Summer of Storms. There are whispered rumors that these two have fallen in love. A former comrade's wife appears, asking for help in her name. Okay. So, these kind of stories are not involving the player characters as romantic figures. Okay. I call that a background element. And you could perhaps say that even the most romance-averse tables could probably handle these kind of statements in the background. Okay. And you might be interested in working romantic topics in like that. But once again, get the consent of and talk to your players. So the next level is romance as a sideline element. And what that is a story takes place that has a subplot of romance involving one or more of the characters and an NPC. And that NPC is important because what that does is it takes an abstracted level. Okay, it makes it so that player characters are not talking to other player characters and having a romantic context. The player is talking to the GM, in the mechanics of the story. And I offer some ideas about that in the Book of the Kiss, and this is not going to be a big Book of the Kiss commercial, I promise. But there's some ways to handle that, but just be thinking in terms of the next level up is between a PC and an NPC. Then finally we have situations where there's multiple romances. That's level 4, multiple romances involving complex serial relationships. And there might be courtly intrigue, and there might be nearly every character must consider where they sit on the romantic spectrum, and many participate in romantic relationships. So this is the kind of this group where people say, pretty much everybody has some kind of romantic interest if there is a person who has that as part of who and what they are. Then finally, the highest level is just plain old romantic fantasy. Everybody is involved. Everybody signs off from the very beginning. The whole point of the game, in addition to all the other aspects of the story, is to talk about romance. And, this is where a lot of people go, oh, hell no, I don't want to be a part of that. But you never know, okay? You never know. You should try it if you can. If you can even try it, because here's the problem. Trying it is difficult. Finding people who are all the same mind can be hard. And I recommend a couple of different ways of going about that. One of my most interesting surprises of late is a Discord attached to the game called Good Society, which is a Jane Austen simulation role-playing game. And they have some of the most involved romance players I've ever seen. Also, there is a podcast called Roll for Romance, which is a romantic D&D podcast. Now, does it get silly at times? Absolutely, it gets silly at times. But it is also sweet, and there's a lot of romantic turns of the plot. And I quite enjoy that. I love it. Every time it comes out, I listen to it right away. And I am a supporter. So I mean, that's just my, I guess my disclosure to you. I'm definitely a supporter of the Roll for Romance podcast. One thing that you can do as a GM to help your players out is to give them methods in the game you're playing to point out how they might be able to move forward in a romantic storyline with that particular game. For example, you could explain how flirting works in your particular game. Flirting is a social skill. Some people have a natural talent for it. I might be one of those people, I don't know. Some people don't, but it is a skill that you can learn. Okay, so you can express that in your game. Your game may have a flirting skill, It may not have that. It may have like charisma as a stat and maybe persuasion as a skill. But whatever you do to make that happen for yourself, it is a good way for you to codify within the rules how to move forward with a romantic conversation. You don't have to get silly with it, but people still do, and I do want to talk about that in a minute. But so codify how you flirt, codify what that does, if anything, and move from there. In the context of the game, sometimes you might find people trying to use spells or other non-consent based techniques to flirt or prosecute their romantic intentions. And that is a big deal. And really, what you need to do is you're going to need to talk about that in session 0. It's part of a safety concern because I would call that dirty pool. Okay, that's not cool to my mind. Okay, all right. Moving on. The reason that a game that is fantasy related becomes so humorous is because of energy. A fantasy romance game it's because of energy. And what I mean by energy, I mean it raises the stakes of potential embarrassment and potential excitement, and that excitement has to be expressed. And probably when you first start out in a romantic fantasy game, you're not going to be capable of describing how your character reacts from a emotion and energy level, because we aren't used to doing that at the table. So you're going to have a lot of people laughing and joking and making puns. And as a GM, I want you to know that when that starts to happen, you are getting somewhere. Okay? And the first thing you should not do is step on that. Don't quash it. Don't censor it. Allow people to get silly for a little while. Now, if every time something romantic comes up, they immediately go to the silly, or if they make fun of the idea of romance, you might want to talk to them outside the game. But this is just part of how we as grown-up humans figure out how this is going. Okay? We make these jokes. They're sometimes pretty funny, sometimes not. It is said that humor comes from pain, and there's a lot of pain involved with romance as well, right? So I want to advise you that when your players are laughing and enjoying themselves, they're laughing and enjoying themselves. So don't step on that per se, but just wait for it to settle down, and then maybe have conversations later about how, wow, that steamy session got really steamy. Obviously, a lot of people are going to go right to what I call fade to black, and that is totally within the realm of possibility. Once you have a group decision to go into romantic fantasy and you have your session 0, fade to black is an option, and you should use that option whenever you don't feel comfortable going forward. You know, it can be something as simple as he turns to you, takes your hand in his, and kisses it so gently, and then we fade to black. You can decide what happened after that, or you can linger on that theme a little bit longer if your group is okay with some NSFW activity, but this is not necessarily an NSFW podcast, so I won't go too much deeper into that. All right, well, we've talked about romance, and likely I will bring this up again because that's who I am. If you're interested in Book of the Kiss, go ahead and go to Drive-Thru RPG. And if you are a listener to my podcast, then please send me a little email at sam@samchupmedia.com, and I will send you a coupon for half off the Book of the Kiss. Okay? All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and have a wonderful day and sweet dreams when you get them.